Welcome to The Christian Atheist, where faith and reason fuse in the incarnation. Episode number 87, Interview with David C. Smalley, Part 1. On January 6th of this year, David C. Smalley, comedian, podcaster, actor, and, I think, comedy writer, interviewed us for his podcast, publishing it on January 8th. I found David intelligent, engaging, and I enjoyed our conversation very much. We've divided it into two parts. Listen to Jenny and I discussing this first part on Thursday's No Compromise, and then the second part next week, followed by another edition of No Compromise. I would ask our believing listeners for your prayers on an upcoming opportunity. As a final note before beginning, our friend Raymond Mulholland interviewed with David this week, and he's pretty quick about posting, so be sure to check out Ray's interview on the David C. Smalley podcast.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Hey, I'm Adam Carolla.
Hi, my name is Penn Jillette.
Not only listening, I'm a guest.
I'm a Penn and Teller, and I am the fourth listener.
And I am the fourth listener.
And that must make me at least the fourth listener.
To keep our three listeners coming back, we must be doing something right. And if you're the fourth listener, we thank you for the support. You can get every episode with no ads at patreon.com/David C. Smalley and take advantage of your fourth listener status.
And we're going to sue David Smalley for slander.
With a world divided, it's time to resurrect nuance and remember the importance of conversation. He's an actor, he's a comedian, and he'll make you think. This is David C. Smalley.
Thank you so much for joining me today. This one, we're back to our roots. People have been asking for a while. We're going to have another believer on the show. Well, today's the day, just for you. If you are also interested in that comedy portion of my life, davidcsmalley.com/tickets is where you can come see me do stand-up. I am at the Hollywood Improv. I'm at the Comedy Store all month this month, different dates, different times. davidcsmalley.com/tickets is where you can grab tickets right now. And I even have a show on my birthday, January 10th, with Madison Sinclair, Matt Rife, and a bunch of other beautiful people. I think I must have been the diversity hire there. Zainab, I mean, that entire lineup looks like a group of supermodels. And then they went, you know what, we should even this out a little bit. Where's that David C. Smalley guy? So that's what I'm looking forward to. That's going to be at the Hollywood Improv in the main room, January 10th. And then I've got another show in that same location, January 30th, with Dane Cook and Ian Edwards and a couple of more superstars. And I'm having a blast out here doing that. I'm at the Comedy Store, January 23rd. But the tickets, like I said, davidcsmalley.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. I got an interesting email the other day. Someone reached out and said, hey, I'm a former atheist professor of philosophy, and I'm now a Christian. And it did not take me long to reply to that. I immediately wanted to talk to this person. As most of you know, I've kind of done a little bit of a shift with my format here. My guest today is not aware of the shift. So to be fair to him, I'm going to bring him on, do an introduction, and explain to him what some of you may already know. But here he is. My guest today is a former atheist professor of philosophy, now Christian, and hosts a podcast titled The Christian Atheist. Join me in welcoming John Wise to the show. John, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, David. Appreciate your allowing me to come on and speak with you.
Hey, I thank you for reaching out. I said right before we started that not a lot of people have reached out to be on the show recently, and I couldn't really figure out why. Like, I've had this show for about 12 years. I guess is this 13 years now? Yeah, we started January 2010. So this is 13. All right. I've said 12 years for an entire year, I guess. So yeah, here we are at 13 years. Wow.
When did podcasting begin?
Actually, so the word was invented in 2004.
Okay.
I actually had a show in 2003
Wow. Right.
but it was internet radio that you could listen to later in archives. So there was no word for it yet. There was no such thing as an RSS feed yet. And yeah, I just had an internet radio show. It was a comedy show, and it was just me and another comedian, and then there was a rapper on the as one of our co-hosts, and we just had a blast, like listening to new unsigned hip hop artists and up and coming stand-up comedians, and we would roast them or give them an opportunity to, showcase their talents. And a year after I started that show, there was a thing called podcast invented, and we were like, oh wait, that's what we've already been doing for a year. Internet radio that you could listen to later. And then that shut down around 2005. And then I relaunched my show in 2010 with this mindset of, I guess, this idea of speaking with people who may disagree with me, but doing so in a respectful way.
You were way ahead of the curve.
I was. I wouldn't want to start a new one today. The market is so oversaturated. So I don't know how long have you had your podcast, The Christian Atheist?
We started on YouTube in 2019, but we didn't actually start podcasting with an RSS feed until 2021. So we've had it for 2 seasons now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
Yes.
Are you ready to pull all of your hair out yet? How's it going?
Yeah, it's quite harrowing for sure, because we do one Christian Atheist episode a week, and we also do a subsidiary podcast called No Compromise, in which my wife and I talk about things, and then we have a third podcast that is called Simple Gifts, in which I do readings of classic literature from the ages.
Okay.
What's that?
Well, no, I'm just saying, okay.
No commentary. That's just straight literary stuff for people who want to learn.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, it's really. I feel very fortunate that I was able to find something that I connected with enough people on, and enough subscribers and enough supporters on Patreon to be able to do this full time. And that allowed me to then branch out and do more stand-up comedy, take on acting roles, take time off to audition. And if I need, 3 weeks off to go film in Denver, I can just record a few episodes, or my listeners will just wait 3 weeks for an episode. It's really cool to have that freedom. So I'm forever indebted and thankful to the patrons of this show for making my life possible and allowing me to engage in these kinds of conversations. So I really hope, if you're not to that point yet, that you do get to that point, because it's a very rewarding career, even if it is harrowing, as you said.
It's fun. I really do enjoy it. It forces you to think about things very carefully, and yet within a deadline. So you can't do what I normally do, is keep pushing things off and take like 5 years to write my dissertation instead of 3 years.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
yeah, totally. That's cool. So let me give you a little bit of background on this show, because my listeners, the ones that have stuck with me for a long time, have started to see a shift. And I don't want you to feel blindsided or victimized here, but I want you to know kind of where I am. So originally, this show started, it was actually a blog in 2008. So 2 years prior to me relaunching an actual podcast version, I was doing a blog in which I would post sort of my take on something Christian based, a Bible verse or something like that. And the idea was people to come there and disagree, and to have to sort of break down whatever topic this was, and have cordial disagreements. And anytime someone would get nasty or mean or insulting, rather than deleting the comment and blocking the person, I would say, do you think that is a productive way to respond to someone who opposes you? Don't you want to change their mind? And eventually that caught on as, wait a minute, I can come here and say things that people disagree with. And if I get insulted, the person who's doing the insulting will ultimately look like the jackass and either apologize or go away on their own. And so I sort of helped build this community of people that were being that were I guess willing to say their views and then deal with the consequences of that, as long as those consequences were fact-based and not character attacks, right? And so when the show started as an actual audio podcast, that's what I would do. I would invite pastors and preachers and hardcore believers into the studio, and we would have 2, 3, sometimes 5-hour marathon discussions about faith. And that's what I did for the last 12 years. And I don't know what happened, but over the last, I guess, 3 to 4 years, honestly, around 2016, the Trump era, if you will, the people that started coming on that were conservative or on the right or fundamentalist just seemed to get nastier and nastier. It seemed like Trump had kind of opened this door to just, I guess, this fire hosing nonsense as disguised as a discussion. And people would come on and say things that were just horrific. And I found myself trying to maintain that olive branch. Oh, you realize how that could upset people. And you know that that hurts people's feelings when you say that. And I was trying to play camp counselor. And I found myself exhausted after every episode going, I am sick of this. If you come on my show and think you're going to justify slavery somehow because God said it, therefore it must be good, we're not the same. We do not share the same morality. And so while I didn't go off and be this nasty, mean atheist who got really nasty with people, I have started to run out of patience with people because 12 years of hearing horrific explanations for abhorrent behavior has just started to wear on me. So here lately, I've started to take more of the comedic route, and I haven't published any of these yet, but I'm taking some of my very early episodes, like 10, 12, maybe even 13 years ago, and replaying a portion of that episode and then telling you what I was really thinking. I didn't say this out loud. Here's what I said, but here's what was going through my mind at the moment, but I didn't want to ruin the conversation. And maybe
Mystery
taking more
Science
of a...
Theater?
Yeah, sort of like a Mystery Science Theater of my own show. Yeah. So, but I do still want to mix in the occasional conversation like this. But I wanted you to know that's where I stand right now. I guess I've just become exhausted in this Trump world of nastiness. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've had lots of conversations online, and you've heard of Michael Wiseman. I went on his show, and we had a blast. So, yeah, okay. I having been an atheist for half of my life, I certainly am aware of the positions. Still have sympathy for them, many of them, and still think it's a rational viewpoint. So, yeah, I don't think you'll find anything nasty here. At least
awesome.
I hope not.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's get into your background. So, former atheist professor of philosophy. So, were you raised as an atheist?
No, I was raised as a Christian. Actually went to Bible college. And by the time I graduated from Bible college, I was an agnostic. So I was going to be a pastor. That was my idea. And by the time I graduated, I had thought to myself, wait a second, this feels like I'm trying to convince myself of something that I have no good reason to believe.
Okay.
And so obviously as an agnostic, it wasn't a good choice of occupations to seek to be a pastor. So I pursued my my higher ed. I pursued something that I started studying in Bible college with a professor, philosophy, and got my PhD in that from the University of California, Irvine. And soon after I started working on my PhD, I was walking across campus one day, and I said to myself, there's no God. And from that point forward, for 25 years, that was my stance.
You know, that sounds very similar to many atheists I know who were raised. So typically, you're definitely atypical for this show, because typically either an atheist will come on and say, my parents never even told me about religion. I never believed it. And then when I was 14, someone tried to get me to go to church, and I went, what's this? This is nonsense. And I never believed. And they're still an atheist to this day. Or you find the person who was raised a very staunch believer and then went the path of ministry, educated themselves on the ideals, and went, there's no way this is true, especially when they start getting into how the Bible was put together, the different translations, the translation errors, the human interaction with the Bible. They go, there's no way to know what God really meant. And even if they're spiritual, they go, it's probably not the Christian God, and I can't trust these people to translate this data. And if God really wanted me to know, there would be more perfect and personal revelation. And so then they start on their path, like you said, of becoming agnostic, and then ultimately usually within an atheist movement, either hosting a podcast, doing a YouTube show, or out there doing debates with people. But you, being raised as a Christian, coming out of that world, finding atheism, and then going back to Christianity, I am so looking forward to this conversation because that's a fascinating viewpoint. Now, before
I really tend to think of atheism as one of the clearest paths to God. I really believe that.
Really, because I've always thought Christianity was a clear path to atheism.
Of course, we're on opposite sides. And that's all right. I didn't know that you were an atheist before we started. I assumed that probably was the case.
Oh, okay.
Because of the little bit that I saw on YouTube that I had a chance. Yeah, you really did respond, like you said in your introduction there. You responded quickly.
Yeah.
And I would have gotten back to you more quickly if it hadn't gone into the spam folder, which kind of was frustrating.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's not your fault.
No. I mean, because you filled out a form, so I got the email instantly, and then when I replied, your email was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" and just stuffed me in the junk. So let's start here. So when you were a believer, take me through a couple of the few things that started to shake your faith the first time.
As I said, the thing that I think, and people ask me this all the time. So it's a self-psychoanalysis, and you're trying to figure out all of your motivations, and that really is a lost cause, because we are a morass covered over with this ego, this self-ego. What Freud talks about is the ego, the surface consciousness. And there's all of these other things underneath us, our motivations. And some of them we're in touch with, some of them we're not. So I do my best to try to sort it out. But I think for me, if I were to try to pinpoint it, the issue became one of, I had real questions, and the answers I got from people in authority in the Christian church and my college professors weren't satisfying me. They were canned answers. They were pat. They weren't thoroughly thought out. And I wanted something more robust. I wanted to know and not believe. And I started to get the feeling as I was moving through the 4 years of Bible college that I was doing all of this to convince myself it was true, rather than really believing it was true. And so I had a whole host of doubts, and the doubts were never adequately, for me, addressed. Then again, I'm a pretty deeply introspective person, so I tend to not easily accept an answer from an authority just because they're an authority. And I like to probe things for myself. And so I guess almost by my very constitution, I am a questioner who doesn't just accept the doctrines that are handed to me, unless I can sort of see the structure and put it together myself and understand all the things. So philosophy became a way for me to try to answer those questions. And science became for me the way in which those questions were answered. And I sort of glommed onto those two and said, this is how I will go through the rest of my life. I will seek knowledge, I will seek truth, and I will go wherever it takes me. And if that means I have to give up this Christian faith, then bye. Because truth is more important to me than holding on to something that's not true because it makes me feel good or it makes other people feel good.
Yeah, I mean, so far we're right on track. So do you not recall? Because most atheists will recall at least one or two of the first few moments that started to crack. We all know that this tends to be a very long process, a sort of a deconversion, if you will, or an unraveling slowly, because you have the faith that you were taught or indoctrinated with, and then there is this emotional connection to it, right? There's this emotional bond. Like
right.
there were, for years, I was calling myself an atheist, but I would hear another atheist say something very insulting about Jesus or God, and I would cringe a little inside because I didn't know why. I'm like, I don't even believe that God exists, but it hurt my feelings somehow. And I realized it was because of how I was raised. I had put God and Jesus on such a pedestal at such a time in which my morality was forming, that someone speaking bad about that creator was just appalling to me, even though I didn't believe that creator existed. So a lot of times it's a very long process, but usually atheists can pinpoint one or two things where they go, wait a minute, there's this one thing. Like for me, it was how does killing the innocent pardon the guilty? It was killing Jesus lets everybody off who is behaving abhorrently. That didn't make sense. It didn't make sense that God would, quote unquote, give his only begotten son, yet also still be with his son today in heaven. What was the sacrifice? That kind of ran through my head. And then of course I questioned things in the Old Testament. I questioned the slavery aspect. And then from then on, it became about the problem of evil. Essentially, it was, divine hiddenness. Why isn't God showing himself? Why isn't he fixing this? Why isn't he helping these poor children with cancer? And then it just unraveled. But I remember my first few things going, wait, is Jesus the Son of God or God incarnate? Because the Bible kind of says both. And there are people who call themselves Christians who disagree on this very basic fact about Jesus, whether he is God or is the Son of God, and they fight each other. The Pentecostals and the Baptists will obviously disagree on this type of thing. And so do you recall one or two of the first few things that was just sort of a hairline crack in your faith?
Oh, Old Testament, for me, the sacrificial system. Even to this day, when I look at the sacrificial system, I think to myself, I think I might have been able to do a better job than that. If God made that, that seems that there's something wrong with that. And well, what type of God would make that kind of a system? So there, and the discrepancies in the Bible, I think they're way overblown, but there are things there. And so, I grew up with this notion of inerrancy, and I guess I should explain that to those who are less technical. The inerrancy of the Bible, like this book we have in front of us, has no errors in it. But that seems patently ridiculous. There is nothing that is human in origin that doesn't have errors in it. And so it's like you're claiming things here that don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And
well, that's
so,
the thing. Most of them don't believe that it is human in origin. And I think that's part of the problem. I think it was literally dictated by God, and they just don't understand how the Bible was compiled. And once I started, one of my quotes that got passed around for quite a while was, how can we be told that all humans are sinners, yet be told to trust these sinners to deliver the perfect word of God? I mean, if these people are broken and fallible humans, why are they responsible for delivering the perfect word of God to people who, if you get the wrong answer, you burn in hell for eternity? Like, this sounds like a really twisted and wicked game,
It's not even, it's even worse than that, because even if you take the view that the writers of the Bible got it all exactly right, human language is flawed. So there are going to be errors in interpretation. There are going to be errors in transmission. There are going to be errors in transcribing. So it's silly to look at the text today and think of it in that way.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Which doesn't mean it's not the word of God. It just means you need to adjust your understanding of what it means to say it's the word of God, and that some doctrines like inerrancy, have to be looked at a little bit more carefully, or maybe less carefully.
I'll say that your comment about the sacrificial system, I'll say, is probably that at the forefront of most people's hairline crack in their faith. A lot of times they will mention something like that. And I found myself before speaking with a fundamentalist who would say something about God loving us, God loving all people. And I would inevitably bring up the testing of Abraham in Genesis 22. And I would bring it up how God told Abraham to kill his son Isaac. And I would start to tell the story. They would interrupt me and go, yeah, but then an angel of the Lord appeared and said, don't do it. And that's where they wanted to stop thinking about it. And I would go, yeah, but first of all, you do know he told him to kill his son so that I know, right?
Yes.
So that I know you love me, as if God has missing knowledge. First of all, let's deal with that philosophical conundrum. God has to tell you to do something to prove something to him that he isn't sure of. So now he's running scientific experiments on us because he doesn't know something. That calls into question how God can be all-knowing and yet be missing information. That's one thing. The second thing, are we going to be concerned with the mental health of Isaac? He's being strapped down and being, a knife wielded over his chest by his father, has no idea what's going on. And at the last moment, they're like, okay, that was just a test. Just JK, bro, JK. Don't stab your son in the chest. Now I know that you love me, so you don't have to do it. But then there's the other part that people don't want to talk about, which is the last line says, and then Abraham found a ram caught in the thicket and used that as the sacrifice, as if that's the happy ending. That's still animal sacrifice. You still went and killed a ram, which most Christians today would classify that as some symbolism of being satanic. That if you're sacrificing a ram or sacrificing a goat of some sort, any sort of animal sacrifice would be considered satanic. Yet one of the most miraculous stories in the Bible, the happy ending is, oh good, we only have to kill a ram instead of this young boy. And so you're right, that sacrificial system is throughout the Bible, including with Jesus, and is very disturbing. It's very disturbing, and certainly seems like a system that wouldn't need to be put into place if God were all powerful, because it suggests that there must be a prerequisite for him to do his powers.
Yeah, I mean, that's you're hitting on all of the things. Sorry. That was what drove me away too. The question of evil, right? The existence of evil. And it's one that faith traditions all across the world have to deal with. It is the fundamental issue. It's the best argument for atheism, for sure. There's no way of getting away with it. And for me, when I got the types of answers like you're talking about here, when I would ask questions like that, it was like, okay, so if that's the best you can do and you don't want me to probe any further, then this isn't making any sense to me. And so that was it.
Well, I have to say,
if I can't find the truth, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of people who've emailed me over the last 12 to, I guess now 13 years, it's going to be hard for me to get used to saying that. Whenever they've talked about how my show sort of helped deconvert them or they lost their faith listening to my show, it's rarely something I said that did it. It's what my guest didn't say, right? They would say exactly what you just said. I was listening. I've always had the question you had as well. You asked the question the way I've always wanted someone to ask it, and that Christian's answer fell short for me.
Yep.
I haven't, my pastor failed to answer, failed to satisfy is really where they get to. They're like, I can't find satisfaction on this point. And they don't just, their faith doesn't crumble under one question, but that is the hairline crack. And then they go, wait, what about this? And what about this? And then Christian after Christian would come on here and fail to satisfy their answers. And the person would eventually go, you know what? If these people are lining up one after one to come on and they can't really answer these basic questions, my pastor can't answer it, my preachers and deacons can't answer it, my husband or wife can't answer it, why am I pretending to believe this? And what you said, I think, is very poignant. You said it felt like you were trying to convince yourself to believe instead of just knowing something. And that phrasing right there, the moment I was baptized, and this is why I have a book, and this is why I called my book Baptized Atheist, because the moment I was baptized, that's like, I say that the preacher must have seen the doubt on my face, because he leans into my ear and he says, son, you can't just say you believe, you have to know it to be true in your heart. And I immediately separated knowledge from belief in that moment and went, I do not know. So I just got baptized, and now I have imposter syndrome. I feel fake. And so I want to go on a mission to confirm my faith by reading the Bible, talking with theology professors, and getting rid of all this doubt so that I can know it to be true in my heart and help save millions of Christians who are also doubting. And that journey is how my faith fell apart, because I was analyzing it, logistically.
Right. Well, where I turned was philosophy. Right. And I started teaching philosophy after I came out of my time at University of California, Irvine. I started teaching philosophy full time at East Stroudsburg University of Pennsylvania. And I taught intro to philosophy for, 6-7 years running, and 4 sections every semester. So that was 8 sections every year. So I taught this same course over and over and over again. And I started teaching it not liking Socrates. Okay. So my course essentially was a course on early Greek philosophy. It talked about philosophy later, but it essentially concentrated on early Greek philosophy and Plato's Republic.
Okay.
But one of the characters in Plato, of course, is Socrates. And one of the central issues for Socrates is that human beings are fundamentally ignorant creatures. We don't know diddly squat. We know next to nothing. Now, I know I'm sitting here talking to you. The philosopher Immanuel Kant, I have no idea what your philosophy background is. But Immanuel Kant said, and this is kind of like the end of the Enlightenment, said that knowledge is when our concepts, our rational concepts, are instantiated in the empirical world. So I can know that I'm sitting here talking to you. I can't be absolutely certain that you're out there, but I hear your voice. So that's pretty clear. But I can't know that for sure. But I know I'm sitting here. I know my wife's sitting here beside me. I just put my hand on her knee. Right. I know that because it's all coming to me through my senses directly. I've got it. Now, of course, that is also subject to doubt, right?
Sure.
Because we know the Matrix movie.
Well, and we've all seen water on a dry road as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And by the way, and as we continue to evolve as a species and technology takes the forefront in our lives, this is only going to become a more difficult problem, because there's no doubt that for maybe 10 or 15 seconds, I could have been AI and you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference, right? Maybe 30 minutes in, you'd be able to tell, but in 20 years, you may not, right? There may be AI that could carry on a conversation with you for an hour without you realizing you were talking with artificial intelligence. Right. So so now you're saying, I hear your voice. I know I'm talking to you. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. This is only good. We're going to somehow know less as we evolve more. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. I think we're on a bad path. I do. But my central point there is that we are fundamentally ignorant creatures. We know next to nothing. In other words, we live our lives on faith. We take a stand on something we think to be true, and then we move forward on it. That's the best we can do. And it actually mirrors the scientific method, because good scientists will tell you, look, this is how we think it is. And experiment has proven it again and again and again. And the word proven is often badly used, but it's just showing over and over again, this seems to be the right answer. But as we get deeper and we probe more, we find that it wasn't exactly the right answer. And we start coming up with a new idea, trying to figure out what it is. And then that too, we find out, even if we're sort of slowly approaching it, as in, I don't know if you know about mathematics, like the asymptote, right? We're getting ever closer to the mystery that's out there. Well, God is the mystery. And God is never fully revealed. And that is what lies at the fundamental basis of human rationality. And so we're getting to what it is that finally brought me around again. For me, all that I loved in this world as a philosopher was the rational, the philosophic, the scientific. And it turned out, the more I investigated, the more I tried to justify my atheism, the more I discovered that there is no way to trust the rational structures without putting some faith in the mystery. And so my initial conversion was a conversion back to theism.
Theism
then collapsed into Christianity.
So translation, you met a beautiful woman and she took you to church. Right?
You did listen to my podcast. There is truth there. Did you listen?
No, I didn't. I just took a guess.
So that actually is true. My wife, Jenny,
yeah,
was a huge part of my coming back.
That's what
for sure.
Okay.
Because she allowed me to remystify the world. I am a Christian with the searching and skeptical mind of an atheist. I don't want to believe anything that isn't true. I know both sides of the looking glass, and I know them with open eyes. I choose Christ's side. I invite you to join me from wherever you stand before the looking glass. That's this week's episode. Thanks for listening. And remember, you can have your religious cake and eat it too. You can have reason, respect for science, a 21st century worldview, and be a Christian.